What's up, everybody? It is Izzy back again with yet another freaking Q&A. Today was biceps and back. Enjoy this weird little video of me doing this lung trainer thing that one of the nurses gave me to try. And let's go to the first question.
Ding, 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 ding. You did the hammer strength.
The hammer strength? How can I tell if my shoulders are a weakness in the bench press? Man, this is just the wrong perspective for you to have as like an intermediate lifter. Some of you think you're Jen Thompson and you've been bench pressing for 30 years and you have no more room to add muscle to your frame and you're already one of the best bench pressers in the world in your weight class. But back in reality, you have like a 275 bench and your triceps are weak and your shoulders are weak and your chest is weak and you're still 2 weight classes below where you should be and you don't even have any general strength and hypertrophy base yet, and you're worried about maximizing carryover with your accessories. You need to get bigger, move up, and get in the right weight class. Everything is weak. What did you do before coaching? I got my first job when I was 15 teaching chess, the board game. I was like my best rating in chess in the high 1700s. And I saw like a job board posting at high school, and I called them up. They pretty much hired me on the spot, and I started there as like an assistant to the main lady that ran the company. And then pretty quickly, within like a couple months, I was doing my own classes. So I did that from like 15 to maybe 19. And the only time I ever had like a real W-2 job was I stocked shelves at Cost Plus. Worldwide Market or whatever it's called, for like 6 months. But I was technically an independent contractor when I was teaching chess, so I have always been in business for myself. I have never had one real job besides stocking shelves for 6 months. The whole rest of the time I've been running businesses or selling services of some kind. Post-workout, what is better, whey protein or meat? So again, there's nothing special about whey protein. Like, some people will exaggerate this idea that you should have whey protein post-workout because it digests quicker, but you could literally make the opposite argument and say I should eat steak post-workout instead because it digests more slowly. And so now, because it digests more slowly, you have a more consistent delivery of dietary amino acids to the bloodstream over a longer period of time post-workout. I always default to quote-unquote real foods rather than packaged powders and things of that nature, because real foods have more micronutrients. It's a better micronutrient profile. Calorie per calorie, you are getting more micros. And that's never a bad thing, and we don't know to what extent it is always a good thing. In other words, we don't know when you reach the point of too many micros, and you probably don't. So meat over whey for me. What would you do differently if you were a gym owner? I think the biggest thing for me is that I would lean into social media stuff more. As a gym owner, there's always going to be a conflict between like making money and doing what's best for the members. But in this day and age, social media plays such a big role, and I think you could get a lot more people involved, people to really feel like they're part of like a tight-knit community if you really lean into social media. And I would personally like make sure that it's advertised as a hardcore gym, and I would fulfill that niche, like appeal to bodybuilders, let them pose in the mirrors, etc. I would let people grunt and use chalk. Jordan Oakley advises people to run grams of gear and orals during their first cycle for 16 to 24 weeks. I mean, do I even need to say anything else? This guy's an idiot. He has no idea what he's talking about. There are literal pro bodybuilders that don't do that. This is why we have like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids doing 700 milligrams of tren a week, because some dumb yahoo said that's what everybody does, and they actually take these people seriously and try to copy it. I mean, that's utter nonsense and terrible advice on every level. How often do you get CNS fatigue? CNS fatigue is like the boogeyman. It doesn't really exist. After every single set that you do, you generate some amount of central fatigue. But CNS fatigue as like a syndrome, like a chronic syndrome, that's just called needing a deload. So how often does that happen to me? Not very often. I don't deload very often because I don't use very high volumes. But again, every set generates some amount of central fatigue, and like CNS fatigue as a syndrome, not a real thing. Is it irresponsible for me to not track all macros except protein so I can eat more intuitively? No. I mean, it would be like irresponsible to save 0% of your paycheck. Eating whatever foods that you want to eat and your body weight isn't changing much and you're happy with your body composition, that's just a personal choice. It's just a decision of like cost, benefit, and goals. Like if you're a professional athlete, maybe that's a little irresponsible, like a professional physique athlete. But if you're already at your body composition goals, then you don't need to be tracking every single bite of food that you eat. Now, if you do have body composition change goals, you might want to do some kind of tracking. But overall, this is not irresponsible, man. It's just a life choice. I need to add more volume to my incline Smith press, but I'm already doing 3 sets. Should I do more chest press instead? Here's the thing. There's actually nothing magical about 3 sets. It's not like a real rule. The reason why I tend to limit things around there is because by the time I do a 4th set, I've had to reduce the load so much that I'm no longer using much over 30% of 1RM, which is the bare minimum for hypertrophy. If you're someone that doesn't lose a lot of performance from set to set, you can get away with more sets. You could even use RIR and do 4 or 5 sets so you're not losing too much performance from set to set as well. What muscle groups should I emphasize to get that David Laid physique? Are you sure you want this dude's physique, or is it his face that you want? I think you kind of have to be born a male model, just to be honest with you. Again, like, you can't really do any exercises to give yourself a small waist and wide collarbones. You either have those or you don't. And there's nothing that you can do to change your bone structure. But, again, bodybuilding is bodybuilding. So if you want width, the muscles that provide width and provide that, like, V-taper aesthetic is going to be lats and shoulders mainly, right? Lats and shoulders are going to be what gives you width. And from there, it's just putting on muscle, generally speaking, to look like you have muscle. I don't think there's a huge emphasis on anything that needs to happen, really. But yeah, width, lats, side delts, shoulders in general, rear delts also. Any quick tips for somebody just starting back out after a year off from the gym? So the number one thing is going to be don't go too hard in the first few sessions back. Don't be training to failure. Don't be training to super high volumes. Don't even go anywhere close to failure. Because then what's going to happen is you're going to end up cripplingly sore and decrease the chances of you going back and re-establishing your habit of going all the time. The second thing is you really have to try to not compare yourself to where you used to be, and just compare from session to session and treat everything as like a comeback PR. Erase your PR board and have comeback PRs. Don't compare it to what you used to be. You'll get back there eventually. Why haven't they discovered an anabolic that doesn't shut down your natural testosterone production? Well, they have. I mean, there's clenbuterol, there's insulin, there's human growth hormone, there's a variety of other substances that have anabolic effects. So I think what you're really asking is, why haven't they discovered an androgen that doesn't do this? And the basic, simple answer to that is that all androgens are derivatives of testosterone. Whether you're talking about nandrolone, trenbolone, those are derivatives of testosterone altered at the 19th carbon link, right? And Prevobol and Masteron, these are DHT derivatives, which is simply another altered form of testosterone. So all of these drugs, ultimately, one way or the other, are altered forms of testosterone. And that is why you tend to struggle to come up with an androgen that isn't going to shut you down. How much weight should I expect to lose when transitioning from a Smith machine to a barbell? Well, here's the thing. A Smith machine bar can weigh anything from 0 to 45 pounds. The one that I use weighs 15 pounds, I believe, but some of them have a counterweight, so they're literally 0 pounds. So you're going to lose anywhere from the difference between the barbell weight and the Smith machine weight to significantly more than that if you haven't been training free weights, because you're not going to be able to stabilize the weight correctly. I don't like the ones that weigh 0 pounds. I think they're annoying. But yeah, it's another it depends answer, but probably 30 pounds at least. How important is tempo to a lift? Compounds versus isolations. It doesn't matter whether it's a compound or an isolation. Tempo is extraordinarily important. Slow twitch fibers primarily grow from controlled eccentrics. I mean, Dante Trudel, who's pretty much the godfather of underground bodybuilding training information, has gone as far as to say that the whole point of lifting a weight is so that you can lower it down slowly. The biggest thing that I see in lifters who have gotten very strong but don't have the size to show for it is usually that they cut range of motion and they don't control their eccentrics. Not only does controlling your eccentrics improve the SFR pretty much across the board, because you're getting more growth from less weight, which is joint sparing, tendon sparing, soft tissue sparing. But man, it's just the difference so often between bigger experienced bodybuilders and those who just don't know what they're doing. You got to control your eccentrics. Do heavily lengthened bias movements fatigue the short position, or is it sparing? It's really just a matter of degree. Like, unless the loading is dropping to literally zero in the short position, some fatigue is going to be generated. And if the movement that you're doing next is heavily short biased, then I don't find that there's a ton of interference effect. So for example, I don't find that, like, if I'm doing the strive leg extension with a short bias, it doesn't tend to affect my hack squat much at all, and vice versa. Like, almost zero perceptible difference there. So it will, but it's a matter of degree. Why did you start doing more sets? Well, I was visited in the night by the hypertrophy fairy, and he strongly encouraged me to do more volume if I want to find more gains under my pillow in the morning. But if you want a serious answer, just go on YouTube and look for the one of the old Q&As that'll say something like, JP says do more volume. And I guess this is as good of a time as any to talk about the fact that so far this is working really well. So I moved up from 1 set to 2 to 3. And I have done 2 and 3 sets in the past, so it's not truly new. But a lot of stuff that I was stuck making that 1% micro load jump on, I'm now adding reps to. I think I added reps to almost every single movement today. So it's really cool to see it actually working in practice. Do your numbers go down when you go off cycle, or do you maintain them? I don't go off cycle, so I do what's called blasting and cruising, and I will alternate between performance enhancing doses and like sports TRT. I'm pretty much never on less than 250 milligrams a week. And on 250 milligrams a week, I not only maintain my numbers, I usually make small increases as long as I'm not in a calorie deficit. On a completely unrelated note, it's really hard to explain just how much the Angles 90 handle improves this movement. It just makes it a lot more like the Nautilus pull down that everybody loves so much. Just changes the angle just enough to make it way better. Training calves the day before quads. Will this be detrimental to quad training? So as I've said time and time again, if you train anything the day before you train something, it will have a detrimental effect because you will accumulate central fatigue, and that central fatigue will bleed over into the next day. Does that mean that you can never train back-to-back days? Of course not. It's just something to be aware of. Now, as far as specifically local calf fatigue affecting your quad training, it can, especially on stuff like leg press. I have seen my leg press performance hurt in the past if I do something like leg press calf raise right before I do leg presses. But I mean, that said, if it works better for your split to train calves the days before quads, you can still make progress doing it that way. It is just something to be mindful of. Personally, I train my calves literally directly before I train quads on the same day, and I don't notice a big impact doing it that way. So full day of rest should be good. What are your thoughts on increasing NEAT rather than lowering calories for fat loss? So first of all, NEAT is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And I hate to be pedantic, but when you're purposely going on walks to increase your step count, that is exercise. It's purposeful exercise. So do I think adding steps can be a legit way to help with fat loss so you don't have to eat as little food? Absolutely. Adding steps is a completely standardizable, objective way to increase your fat loss without taking away food, but it's not neat. What is the slowest rate of weight gain that you would do in a bulk? So I just don't believe in hard rules like this. There isn't going to be the same number for a 120 pound female as again a 240 pound enhanced male. Okay, and there's a bunch of everything in between in that spectrum also. Typically I look more so at pictures and performance in the gym. If performance in the gym is flying, you're adding reps and weight every single session, you can afford to gain faster. If you're really just eking out small progressions, you should be gaining slower. Personally, I go anywhere from 1/4 pound a week to about 1 pound a week or so. It just depends. Can a strain in a muscle get your CRP higher than normal? Do I look like a doctor to you? Oh, just kidding with this filter. I guess I do. It could, yes. I mean, C-reactive protein, right? That's just going to be made in the liver, and it's an enzyme that's released in response to inflammation. So a muscle strain could definitely cause localized inflammation, cause inflammation markers to rise. That's possible. That said, is this something I'm like super confident about? Again, no. I'm not a real doctor, just a fake one on Instagram. My hamstrings are still sore 3 days later after doing a rest pause set of leg curls. Any suggestions on how to reduce this soreness? Well, if what you're doing right now is too much, have you thought about doing less next time? I guess on a more helpful note, there's something called the repeated bout effect, and the repeated bout effect essentially works like this. Anytime that your body is exposed to a stimulus, the next time it is exposed to that stimulus, the damage that it takes will be less. The response to the stimulus will be less. You'll be more protected against that stimulus. So if this is the very first time you've done a rest pause set, it'll get better. If it's not the first time, like, don't use intensifiers that make you sore for too long. Should you plan a cheat meal days in advance and adjust the preceding day's macros, or should you just have it and not worry about it too much? This totally depends on periodization, in my opinion. Like, if you're in the middle of a contest prep and you're hungry, you can't really afford to just go see what happens at Olive Garden, right? You're going to end up eating 42 breadsticks and putting 9 pounds of fat back on. However, if you're like in the off season, you're in a surplus, you're not really that hungry, you can sort of just eyeball things and make a calorie equivalent replacement, or at least close enough, and it won't really matter because you won't be that hungry. You're not as likely to overeat. And frankly, I do prefer that approach for the off season, or at least when I'm far away from a contest, because it reduces diet fatigue, lets you be a little bit more of a normal person. And then when you do head into a contest prep or any kind of diet, you have less psychological fatigue, less diet fatigue, and it's easier to be strict for a longer period of time versus if you're just psychotically strict all year round. Would you ever program line cable bicep curls for yourself or a client? So my general thing about exercise selection is that I do not mandate certain exercises for clients. I'll tell them the stuff that has worked best for me. And when it comes to curls, that's going to be things like face away cable curls, incline dumbbell curls, preacher curls. My favorite would be a seated machine preacher curl with rotating handles that you can do both arms at the same time. But dumbbell preacher curls are also great. But again, SFR is going to be individual. People are built differently. People enjoy different things. And so as long as you get a good SFR from a curl movement, have at it. I don't think you need to do specific ones. I worked with JoeyFlexx for powerlifting programming, and it'd be like 2016, 2017. I can't remember exactly. And, he did such a bad job of communication and giving me a cookie cutter program that after the first 2 months, I paid him up front for the next 6 months. And for those of you with the room temperature IQ, that's called sarcasm. As far as I can tell, someone just got butthurt and decided to try and start a smear campaign to cancel Joey, and it's not going to work.
All right, I'm giving these things a shot. They are 1.25 pound clip-on. Yeah, not bad. Not bad.
The Micro Gains clip-on dumbbell micro weights, I found them to be pretty good so far. They don't fall off at all. They're very secure. You can definitely fit 2, if not 3 per dumbbell handle and still have room for your hand. My only complaint is that it's a ripoff. I paid $100 for 5 pounds of dumbbell micro plates, which is like worse than peak COVID price gouging. All right, everybody, that is it for today. As always, if you like the video, like the video. Let me know if you have any comments or questions in the comment section. Imagine that. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a nice day and enjoy this picture of Mello and Kona in the snow.